Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about breaking old belief patterns. And um, I know I wanted to talk about this for a little bit now. I knew I was going to make a video about kind of um, the ego and how to break certain patterns. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to start it, but I was at work today. And one of my coworkers, was talking about a subject, and I just thought it was interesting. And I just realized how much I've changed, uh, since in my life, I've changed quite a bit. Um, and she was talking about her son, and I believe he was in daycare, and that her son was pinched by another child, and so then her son, struck the child, and so she was kind of, even though she was kind of reprimanding the other child, saying, well, don't pinch, don't pinch anybody or whatnot. And she had mentioned that, well, at least I know my child won't get bullied, that he'll hit back, you know. And it took me back to something that my mother always used to tell me, that she always taught us, that if somebody hits you, you hit them back. And I never really gave um, that thought, that belief, I guess, that was instilled to me by my mother early on. I never gave it much thought growing up because it just never came up. I never really um, I always seem to find a way to avoid um, physical contact. I really never grew up with, in any fights, which is really surprising as I look back on my life. I mean, I was around, a lot of children that, were in fights, and I just never got into any. And later on uh, in life, I know, of course, I was also, my mother used to uh, used to spank us. Um, I would say abuse us, because she actually took the belt, and my brother and I, when I say us, excuse me, used to beat me with the belt, um, on occasion, to where you would have pretty nasty marks on yourself. And I, you know, so I grew up with the mentality that, the spankings were normal and were actually good for you. And I'm fortunate that I waited so long before I had kids, because I never really gave that thought, that belief that I grew up with, any of my attention. And because I never really gave it any of my attention, any of my time to actually analyze that and say, wait a minute, is that true? That's the only way, or even the best way to um, to choose, that it was kind of like reactionary. That was the only option. And so I had a few pets. I had like ferrets, and you know, um, and when they would do something bad, I would smack them in the behind. And this is a very small animal, and I used to smack them, when they would do something bad. And I remember that whenever I did that, I would always feel terrible about myself, and um, and I have, with my daughter, I decided that I was going to break the pattern of spanking my children. I was not going to do that. That was my decision, that I wasn't going to do that. And one of the main reasons was that I realized that there was another option. I didn't have to beat my children. And I also started to realize, especially now, since my daughter is 2, that yes, they are challenging, but if you allow that pattern and to take everything that they are doing as something personal, they're doing it to me. They're doing it to me, in spite of me. They're not listening to me, and they should. And and you just analyze that should. Should they really, at 2 years old, should they really listen to every word you say and obey you? Probably not. At 2 years old, they're probably acting exactly like a 2-year-old. And when you realize that and bring your conscious awareness into the moment without reacting to the belief, and then you can bring some wisdom into the situation. Um, I mean, I can't, especially now, I mean, I can't even fathom, looking at my 2-year-old daughter and, me, such a bigger man, towering over her and spanking her on the butt, or, I mean, I just can't see myself doing that. And I don't plan on doing that also for the simple reason is I don't want to teach her that it's okay to start hitting other children as well. I want to let her know that there should be always another option. Certainly, if you're cornered, you know, and the only way out of the situation is to fight, then the options are very limited. But typically, when most kids, if a kid strikes another kid, they're usually in an open space, and there's options for them to leave the situation. So it's one of those things where you're trying to evaluate the situation and really say, is this the only option available? The reason why this really strikes a chord with me because I picture my mother at the time when she used to beat us, and she would lose herself in the emotion of the anger and would just strike us. And you can almost, as I look back on that in my memory, I can almost say that my mother disappeared at that point, and then this creature, this monster that took over my mother and started to strike us and beat us with a belt. Um, again, looking at it now, um, it seems very brutal. I know the mentality of a lot of parents when they say, if some kid hits you, you hit them back, it's because they don't want their child to be bullied. They don't want them to be a victim. But I look at it the other way. I look at it that, first of all, violence doesn't necessarily seem to be solved by violence most of the time. Most of the time, that when you respond in that way, you're just basically saying, I am a victim of my environment. I react to what the environment tells me to do, and there's no other options available. And not only that, but when you start to do that, a lot of times it brings more violence into your life. Um, the other thing is that it's not really true. It's not true that they're, again, they're a victim if they um, avoid contact. If they're struck and to walk away from the situation, um, that doesn't mean that their child is weak. That actually means that they have a very strong sense of character. It's much harder to stay conscious and aware when you have somebody that's lost themselves in their emotion. Essentially, they are unconscious at that time and not real and can't really be held accountable because they've kind of lost themselves in the emotion. They're not really there. They're not aware of the present moment so much because they've just lost themselves. And it takes somebody to actually stay conscious and aware to realize I'm not going to participate in this and I'm going to walk away from this. That shows a much stronger person. It really shows a lot of power that they have over themselves and over the situation. Um, so it's just something that I wanted to just bring up and talk about. And it was, I just thought about it, as it was, as it was brought up, and I didn't really participate in the conversation, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. But it was just something, of course, maybe with my childhood and whatnot and then the way I've changed, and I'm not going to perpetuate that line of that behavior pattern um, anymore. I'm going to create a new behavior pattern. And the reason why I was able to do that is by bringing my awareness to the situation, bringing my awareness to the problem. Because again, if you don't realize that there is a problem, you're essentially unconscious to it. You don't know that it exists. Um, and that's all I have to say about this for today. And thank you for everyone for watching. And take care.